The Silence and the Fury is a massive addition to the world of Total War Warhammer, releasing a plethora of new units, overhauling the whole Beastman faction, introducing the brand new Dwarf rune magic system, and even the Ogres are making an appearance on the Mortal Empires. On that note, the DLC updates to Total War Warhammer 2 has finally come to an end, and that leaves one last question. What will be the last major update? Or to be exact, what will be the pre-order race? And why is it the Chaos Dwarfs? Now many players are probably thinking, with the release of Ogre Mercenaries, Ogre Kingdoms has to be on the horizon. But I think with the limited information available to players, Ogre as a full-blown faction is not going to be available before Game 3. Which means that the DLC will instead be Chaos Dwarfs. This will be supported by the game's current condition, by the lore, and also by the game's development throughout the years. Granted, everything I'm going to say here is going to be based on my speculations and theories, so do take whatever I'm going to say with a pinch of salt. Especially CA has not made any relevant official statements as of the time of this video's recording. To begin with, we are going to look at the campaign map, and we're going to pull a sneaky one right here by removing the Fog of War with Power of Modding. Now we have Malus Darkblade starting on the Dragon Isles. To his northwest, Imric on the Plain of Bones, and to his northeast, Clan Ashen occupying Nobler Country. But to search for clues for the pre-ordered race, we need to look further north. What we are seeing here is a large piece of flatland. No terrain, no settlements, just empty space and some climate patterns covering them with snow, sand, or grass. You might wonder, what is this piece of flatland suddenly appearing out of nowhere on the map? And this is where we pull out a map of the old world. This empty space, a vast piece of landmass to the east of World's Edge Mountains, is the home of the Chaos Dwarfs and a merciless wasteland called the Dark Lands. It is a barren piece of land filled with volcanic activities, with the crust constantly breaking apart, spewing out lava, oil, rare minerals and other contents of the earth, bringing the riches of the planet from the depths of the crust to the surface. Life is harsh on the Dark Lands, but the promise of rare gems and metals was an irresistible temptation to the dwarfs. Therefore, a long time ago, before the arrival of Chaos, some adventurous dwarfs split off from their cousins in the west, expanded into the Dark Lands despite the harsh conditions, for it offers rare minerals they sought in great abundance. However, when the Chaos arrived, these dwarfs are cut off from their brethren. Cut off and surrounded by the forces of ruinous powers, these dwarfs abandoned their ancestral gods and embraced the evil bull god Hashut. With the help of evil magic from Hashut as well as their own dwarfish ingenuity, they managed to erect great monuments of their industrial might in the middle of the Darklands, calling this polluted and inhospitable part of the old world their home. Now back to the campaign map. As you can see here, CA has already allocated a huge space for the Darklands, with this empty plot of land spanning across a considerable part of the map, starting from the east of the World's Edge Mountains and stopping just shy of the Mountains of Morn. You can even see that some of the existing settlements in the game located right next to the empty space, they have their locations corresponded exactly to the piece of old world map we have right here. One can be fairly certain that the home of the Chaos Dwarfs is being prepared in the works, even completed with climate patterns. All CA have to do is to fill it with terrain and settlements and it will be ready for release. On the other hand, the Mountains of Morn and the Great Mall where the Ogre Kingdoms reside are not even on the campaign map. Their location is a little bit more to the east than the current edge of the world map, and thus the map is not prepared for the Ogres just yet, unless CA decided to put the Ogres in the Darklands, which honestly makes no sense. They can't just skip the Darklands either, since it will leave a huge gap between the Mountains of Morn and the World's Edge Mountain. So judging from the current state of the campaign map, it is certain that CA designed it with adding Chaos Dwarfs in mind, instead of the Ogre Kingdoms. Now with the Ogres residing further to the east of the current campaign map, it makes more sense for the Ogres to be introduced as a DLC to Game 3 instead of a standalone pre-order race that can be added to Game 2. As for the reason why, let's do a little bit of lore digging. Ogres used to be some peaceful tribes living in an area bordering the Grand Cathay, but as their numbers grew, they wanted more food, so they turned to the people of the Cathay for help, and by help I mean, it would be helpful if you can be my dinner. Of course, the Cathay Dragon Emperor couldn't just stand there and do nothing, so very conveniently, a comet crashed into the plains where the ogres resided, turning it into yet another piece of wasteland and cut off their access to the Cathay. Of course, there is no confirmation from the Cathay government, but it is heavily implied to be the work of the Dragon Emperor and his coven of astronomers. The arrival of the comet almost wiped out the whole race of the ogres, and granted the survivors an insatiable hunger. The crash site itself became the Great Mole, which is now a deity worshipped by all ogres. So we know the ogres were originally from the east and they had beef with the Cathay. From a lore standpoint, it makes a pretty nice lead to introduce them to a setting where Cathay is set. When we look back at the race packs, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, CA and Games Workshop likes to invite a race onto the stage with a bit of conflict against the existing race in the game. For example, we have the Zombie Pirates Vampire Coast, a race that did not exist on tabletop, where Luther Harkon had some grudging against the Lizardman, where he had to hunt down their trinkets to restore his split personality. For the Game 1 races, we had the Beastmen, where Boris Todbringer was also introduced around the same time as the DLC. And Boris Todbringer, he had a past with Kazrak One Eye, so that makes a nice conflict point between the Empire and the Beastmen. Don't forget about the Wood Elves, where they were introduced with a mini campaign against the Beastmen where you have to defend the Oak of Ages against Beastmen incursion. Of course, this is by no means indicatory to what CA would do, but just from a lore perspective, it makes total sense to put ogres into a setting where there would be a reason or motive in their own lore to conflict with a base race in Game 3, instead of wasting the potential and inserting them into Game 2. Now we're on the third part of the video, the most speculation heavy part, where we try to predict CA's moves based on how they release Warhammer content over the past few years. First of all, the fact that CA released ogres in the form of a mercenary system shows that they do not have enough confidence to release it as a full-blown faction. Of course, this is only my guess, but I think CA is rather careful with implementing the ogres, with the mercenary system we see right now being the testing grounds for ogres as troops on a more casual sandboxy environment. Ogres currently seems to be a rather glass cannon unit that can be easily countered by missiles and anti-large infantry spams with their low armor, large hitboxes and low model counts. And that is why I think CA is trying to collect more feedback from the user experience of the Ogre mercenaries to see what adjustments they can make to make Ogre units more viable in battles. Of course, there are the Nobblers to fill out the regular infantry role for the Ogre Kingdoms to provide bodies for screening and saturation, but I think that there is bound to be some adjustments to ogres as units, and I don't think CA would want to give themselves only a time limit of 2 to 3 months to complete all the changes, because we all know that Game 3 is planned to be out by the end of this year, and the pre-order race should be released at least a couple months before that. Secondly, we should look into the two current pre-order races. With Warriors of Chaos and Norskin, we can see that both of them are Chaos aligned. So, not the strongest reasoning, but maybe they will keep using this tradition for all 3 games and bring in a third pre-order race also related to Chaos, making Chaos Dwarfs the perfect candidate. And lastly, a personal thought, but I don't see CA releasing similar content consecutively. The mercenary content seems more like something to let people have a way of playing the ogres a bit before the actual faction gets released as the first DLC faction in Game 3. So yeah, with the current campaign map prepared for the Chaos Dwarfs, with the Darklands being slotted into the map, as well as on a lore perspective, Ogre Kingdoms would make more sense to be inserted into Game 3 with their background conflict with Cathay, as well as CA's own game release habits. In terms of Total War Warhammer, I think that Chaos Dwarfs are definitely the strongest candidate for the pre-order DLC faction. And what do you think? Feel free to leave a comment down below and share your thoughts if you have any input on this question. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more Total War Warhammer online multiplayer content, as I generally do regular updates on topics covering tips and strategies for multiplayer, wild army builds, or general battle replays. So that's basically it for today's video. I hope you enjoy it and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.